world's most evil companies are hiding in plain sight. Some build their empires with child slaves. Others are watching you as we speak. And one is literally in your blood. But don't worry, because in this video, you'll see what the worst of these organizations have been doing behind the scenes, all to find out what is the most evil company. Starting with the largest athletic brand in the world, Nike. In the 1970s, started making use of factories in Asia where workers were paid 14 cents an hour, exposed to incredibly toxic fumes, and physically and verbally abused. Nike initially brushed off these issues until a 4K image of a 12-year-old Pakistani boy sewing Nike soccer balls sparked public outrage. Facing a tanking reputation, Nike apologized and announced they would be fixing their labor practices, but to this day, they still just haven't stopped doing it. But is a little slave labor really that bad compared to companies who have killed millions, caused drug crises, and even tried to destroy the planet? So to find the most evil company ever, let's get even worse, with a brand you've probably drank before. In 1886, an American Civil War veteran was looking to find a substitute for his morphine addiction, so he mixed together cocaine, caffeine, and sugar syrup into a drink he called Coca-Cola. It was marketed as a cure for headaches and fatigue. It definitely cured fatigue, but sadly in 1904, facing public and regulatory pressure, Coke had to stop using actual Coke in their formula, and human productivity has never recovered. But as health sciences improved in the 1960s, Coke had a bigger problem. How do you get a health-conscious world to buy canned diabetes? Well, if you're Coke, the answer is spend millions of dollars funding corrupt health organizations to push the narrative that obesity is just caused by a lack of exercise. Lobby against dietary guidelines and sugar taxes, then sponsor the Olympics and professional athletes to subconsciously make your products appear more healthy. Tell the world you don't advertise to children, then popularize Santa Claus with your marketing and put vending machines in elementary schools. Then to boost your profits, outsource to bottling plants that assassinate union members and drain entire towns' water supplies. Coca-Cola's devious tactics have made them the largest beverage brand on the planet, giving out 2 billion servings a day, and human arteries have never recovered. But this next company kills you a lot faster than sugar. Boeing. When developing the 737 MAX, realized the plane would tilt upward during takeoff, so they used a software called MCAS to automatically push the tilting plane back down. But adding this system would require extra pilot training, which would be expensive and time-consuming. So to avoid all that, Boeing didn't tell anyone about it, including the pilots.
It's still a mystery tonight what caused this brand new plane to crash into the ocean.
The pilots of Lion Air Flight 610 fought a tug-of-war battle with the plane's computer, finally losing the battle as the plane slammed into the ocean at 450 miles per hour.
After the crash of Lion Air Flight 610, the regulators conducted a risk assessment that estimated there would be 15 more 737 MAX crashes if MCAS wasn't fixed. They didn't release this report. Instead, they sent out a brief memo to pilots with no mention of MCAS and kept the planes in the air. 5 months later, another 737 MAX crashed in the exact same way. The planes were then banned from flying, and Boeing had 346 deaths on their hands. Their market value dropped by 25%. They were fined $2.5 billion for damages and fraud. Their CEO got fired, of course with a little parting gift, and Boeing promised a new commitment to safety. By 2020, the 737 MAX was back in the skies, and 4 years later, a door blew off. Luckily, no one was sitting by the door, so there were no fatalities, with the exception of Boeing's reputation. Their promise of a new commitment to safety fell apart when investigations found the door had been installed with no bolts. Boeing's horrendous quality control, like using Dawn dish soap as lubricant, hotel key cards to check seals, and scrapped parts as replacements on real aircrafts, began getting exposed by whistleblower after whistleblower, a suspicious amount of whom are now dead. The whole reason Boeing cut corners was to try and make more money to beat their main competitor. They ended up killing hundreds of people, losing billions of dollars, and getting beaten by that competitor. So Boeing screwed themselves in every possible way, except for their doors. But let's get even more evil with a company that just might play a role in your entire life. You're born, and your first meal is a bottle of baby formula. As a kid, your favorite treats become Kit Kats and Crunch Bars. At home, you eat Hot Pockets and drink Poland Spring, or Pure Life, or Pellegrino, depending on your parents' socioeconomic status. As you get older and find your first job, you survive off instant coffee and lean cuisine. Then on your deathbed, you get your choice of feeding tube mixes: Nutrin, Complete, Peptamen. Then you die, and Nestle loses a lifetime customer. Nestle is the world's biggest alleged food company, and they're well known for being comedically evil. You might have heard of their extensive use of child labor. In 2001, the US tried to fight back against this by making a law that required slave labor labeling on chocolate wrappers. But Nestle and their cronies lobbied it out of existence. They instead pinky promised to phase out child labor by 2005. After missing that deadline, they delayed it to 2008, then 2010. Then 2020, they'll get to it one day. You might have heard of Nestle draining water from water-struggling communities using cheaper expired permits, then selling it back to them in overpriced plastic. But Nestle's most evil tactic began in the 1970s. In order to expand the market for their baby formula, they sent saleswomen dressed as nurses to developing countries to promote the product as a superior alternative to old-fashioned breast milk. Not only was this not true, but formula has to be mixed with water, and Nestle was promoting in places where water was contaminated. Nestle targeted these families with free samples that lasted just long enough for the mother to lose her ability to produce breast milk, leaving her no choice but to continue buying the formula. What resulted was a massive amount of breastfed babies switching to formula and getting sick. It's estimated that Nestle's campaign caused over 10 million deaths, but something a lot stranger happened in China. In 2008, the Sanlu group secretly added a chemical called melamine to their baby formula to boost its protein count. This contaminated formula caused health problems for over 300,000 children in China, and 6 of them died. But unlike Nestle, the Sanlu executives faced criminal punishment. Some of them were sent to prison, but 2 of them were sentenced to death. After getting millions in compensation claims from victims, Sanlu declared bankruptcy and was fully dissolved. Nestle caused much more damage, but their alleged food company is still thriving. Nestle is a strong candidate for the most evil company ever, but this next company is evil for a very different reason. After 9/11, the United States launched the biggest mass surveillance program in history. It was called Total Information Awareness, and it was made to collect and monitor everyone's private data with the goal of finding terrorists before they could act. But after public protest, it was shut down in 2003, and the US narrowly avoided becoming a dystopian surveillance state. A few months later, 2 guys founded Palantir. One of those guys was PayPal billionaire Peter Thiel.
You would prefer the human race to endure, right?
The other guy was philosophy major Alex Karp.
I spent a lot of time talking to Nazis, like real Nazis.
After getting funding from the CIA, they would end up building Palantir into one of the most controversial companies ever.
Our product is used on occasion to kill people.
So, what does Palantir actually do? Large companies, as well as countries, collect a lot of data on their customers. So much data that they can't make any sense of it. This is where Palantir comes in. They'll analyze all that data with AI and put it into one platform designed to help make actionable decisions. It's been used on everything, from helping allocate resources after disasters or during pandemics, to optimizing the Wendy's supply chain, to spying on employees at JP Morgan, to workplace deportations and predictive policing. But if you happen to have an all-powerful tool that will analyze an infinite amount of personal data, you could also use it
To scare enemies and on occasion kill them. Put the fear of death into our adversaries at any random moment. Why do we wait till our enemies attack?
And they need to wake up scared and go to bed scared. Something really bad is going to happen to you and your friends and your cousins.
We'll go after your assets, we'll go after everything. We'll keep on going for generations.
Palantir's biggest market is war. In the US, they get paid billions of dollars to make the American warfighter fight the way they were born to fight. In Ukraine, they handed over the kill chain, a software that handles everything from finding a target to destroying it. With Israel, Palantir helps power the military's war machine. Their work is very secretive, but we do know that they're pretty good pals.
Your AI and your technology from Palantir kills Palestinians!
Mostly terrorists, that's true.
Palantir is just a tool. All it does is analyze other people's data. But the strength of this tool and how it can be used give it a concerning level of influence.
Our primary mission is, in fact, to set a global standard for the world for behavior.
Palantir pretty much markets itself as evil, but another company you would never expect is even worse. In 1899, 2 banana businessmen merged together to form the United Fruit Company. Their first course of action was conquering Central America. They bought up land, built entire towns, and took control of infrastructure in places like Guatemala, Honduras, and Colombia in order to exploit their populations for banana production. These pimped out countries became known as banana republics. Conditions for workers obviously sucked, so in 1928, they went on strike with a list of demands. United Fruit refused to negotiate and instead went over to their boy the United States, and they were like, "We're in trouble. Our workers are revolting. They want us to pay them in money instead of coupons and get a 6-day work week instead of 7. Dang. We'd love to help you, but we're a bit preoccupied with rich white people activities. So if you'll excuse me— Wait! They're communists. After indirectly rampaging their own workers, the United Fruit Company did it again. But this time, they got the US to overthrow the Guatemalan government and replace the leader they didn't like with a dictator who assassinated a bunch of people. Then he got assassinated, and Guatemala went into a 36-year-long civil war that killed almost 200,000 people. Dang. We'd love to help them, but we're a bit preoccupied with bananas. United Fruit would later rebrand to Chiquita Banana, leaning into the friendlier theme to distract you from their country-destroying imperialism. Chiquita has generally stayed out of trouble, only doing small things here and there, like giving millions of dollars to paramilitary terrorist organizations. But banana companies aren't the only ones messing with entire countries. When Facebook went public in 2012, almost everyone with internet was already on their platform. They needed a new way to expand, and Zuck had the perfect idea. He started Internet.org, which would bring internet to developing countries through Facebook products. His new customer acquisition conquest began in Zambia, then the Philippines, India, Colombia, Myanmar. Wait, what? There's a problem in India. Like a serious problem. They're using Facebook to spread fake images claiming that Buddhists are massacring Muslims and it's leading to riots where people are dying. Oh no. Keep going. Expansion continued until Facebook had conquered 100 million new users. But this is where things started falling apart. See, Facebook's moderation technology didn't work properly with different languages, and their moderation teams were incredibly understaffed and clueless about local culture. This lack of oversight led to Facebook becoming a propaganda tool for dictators in places like the Philippines and Cambodia. The Sri Lankan government accused Facebook of failing to control posts that contributed to deadly riots. Same with Ethiopia. And in Myanmar, Facebook played a determining role in a genocide, according to the UN. Facebook themselves admit they didn't do enough to protect their foreign colonies, but the bigger problem is that their entire platform rewards the most harmful misinformation. And leaked documents show Zuck rejecting potential fixes to this problem because they would reduce user engagement.
Facebook has realized if they change the algorithm to be safer, they'll make less money.
Facebook claims their goal is to bring the world closer together, but reckless expansion and an engagement at all costs approach has in many cases brought the world further apart. But to answer the question of the most evil company, there's an entire sector we need to look at. Oil companies. Here's what they're up to. Shell ravaged the country of Nigeria by supporting violent militaries and introducing the population to flavored water. BP caused the biggest oil spill in US history when their rig exploded in the Gulf of Mexico. But the worst oil company ever spawned into existence in 1911 when Rockefeller's Standard Oil got split into 34 pieces. A few of those pieces merged together to form Exxon, which later merged into ExxonMobil. They're now the biggest US-based oil company, producing 3% of the world's petroleum, and they are everything wrong with the industry. They of course have sketchy relations to overseas abuse, as well as their own historic oil spill, where they fought against paying out penalties for 14 years. But Exxon's greatest evil affects the entire planet, because back in the 70s, they conducted internal research that found burning fossil fuels was influencing the global climate in ways that would be potentially catastrophic and irreversible. Having a product that's actively cooking the earth is a big problem. For the marketing department, Exxon proceeded to spend millions of dollars in support of climate change denial. They funded science-denying front groups and bought an advertisement in the New York Times every week for 30 years to mislead people on the studies they themselves conducted. Exxon's early predictions of global warming ended up being more accurate than NASA's, but they weren't in the business of working towards a fix. Exxon's especially evil because they put the planet on the line, but so did another company.
Something wrong with this cow. And they keep trying to tell me there's nothing wrong with these things.
In 1998, a farmer in West Virginia noticed his animals dying from disturbing symptoms. This farmer happened to live near a landfill for the chemical company DuPont. He hired a lawyer who took legal action against the company, demanding internal documents. They sent back 110,000 pages, just to be annoying. But the lawyer read through all of it, and what he found was more disturbing than what anyone could have imagined. In 1938, a DuPont chemist accidentally discovered an impossibly slippery substance. They called it Teflon, and they sold it to the world as a miracle non-stick coating. Soon, it was in nearly every kitchen in America. In order to create Teflon, DuPont used another chemical called PFOA. This stuff doesn't naturally break down. It's pretty much indestructible. It's a forever chemical. DuPont was slightly concerned about this, so they began conducting internal studies. What they found was that PFOA would kill animals in a single dose, was linked to birth defects and cancer in humans, and was highly toxic. When these results were shown to the execs, they were like, "Dear God, we can't have our chemicals killing people. I know it's terrible, we need to—" I didn't finish my sentence. We can't have our chemicals killing people, getting in the way of our business. What? Don't release any of these studies publicly, and don't tell the regulators. We're making $1 billion a year in profit from this. It's too risky for us to stop. Plus, I think we'll be fine. I mean, it's not like we're dumping this stuff into the environment. DuPont was dumping so much of this stuff into the environment that they had lost track of how much they had dumped. They were doing all of this despite being clearly warned not to, and it was this dumping that killed the livestock in West Virginia, which resulted in the lawsuit that exposed everything. DuPont had to pay hundreds of millions of dollars in settlements, and they began phasing out these chemicals, but it was too late. 99% of people on Earth now have forever chemicals, or PFAS, in their blood, thanks to DuPont and a few of their business pals. Most people have levels that are of lower concern, but millions have amounts that put them at a higher risk of cancer and other complications. Forever chemicals are decreasing in use, but they remain a problem. And because so many regulators have ties to chemical companies like DuPont, they might be sticking around. But this next company also messes with our health in a more evil way. Imagine there's a button. Every time you click it, you make $10,000, but a random person dies. What would you do? A normal person would get hesitant. A health insurance company would get an auto clicker. See, for UnitedHealthcare, this isn't a random button. It's a denial button, and it's not hurting random people. It's hurting people who've been paying United thousands of dollars a year for insurance, under the promise that when they get sick, United will cover their expensive medical care. This auto clicker also exists in real life. It's called NH Predict. It's an AI tool that automatically rejects people's requests for medical treatment with an alleged 90% error rate. Armed with this tool, United is infamous for its denials. The most cited number is that they deny 33% of treatment requests, but this was based on pretty incomplete data. United doesn't release their actual numbers, and they tell employees not to answer questions about their decision making, so we don't have much information. But we do know that 1 in 3 doctors have seen insurance delays lead to a serious adverse event, anything from hospitalization to death, with many doctors complaining specifically about United.
You had a life-threatening condition, you have insurance, it should be covered, period. Yep. And they are fighting it with technicalities. This is UnitedHealthcare.
Apart from denying to do the one thing they promised to do, United also gives secret bonuses to try and keep patients out of hospitals, because each hospital visit costs them money. United claims this prevents unnecessary care, while whistleblowers say it puts elderly patients in danger. But United is much more than an insurance company. See, ever since 2011, insurers have been required by law to spend 85% of the money they collect from customers on their actual medical care. So United does actually pay out a majority of their revenue on treatment requests. But they're okay with this, because in many cases, they own the hospitals that get the money. United is affiliated with 10% of all the doctors in the US, and their pharmacy company controls 20% of the market. So United collects insurance money, then pays it to their own medical care providers at inflated rates. But even more insane is that United also owns a company that supplies medical loans to doctors and patients. So if United denies to pay your medical bill and you have to go into debt to afford your treatment, they make money off that too. The healthcare system in the United States has a lot of problems, and the United Health Group makes money off all of them. But while United plays a part in a troubling industry, other companies create industries that harm even more people.
This is a man who smokes Marlboro cigarettes. What kind of a man is he?
In 1954, tobacco conglomerate Philip Morris created the Marlboro Man, the most influential marketing campaign in history. Rather than advertising through information, Marlboro advertised through lifestyle. The Marlboro Man was masculine, rugged, and free, unconcerned with non-manly things, like getting cancer. See, in the earlier 1950s, studies began linking smoking to lung cancer, and sensing danger, all the top tobacco CEOs met up at a hotel. They knew they needed to work together, but they also knew advertising alone wouldn't save them, and neither would attacking the anti-smoking research. What they needed to do was take control of the science. In a full-page advertisement ran in over 400 newspapers, the Tobacco Bros gave a frank statement to cigarette smokers, where they cast doubt on the current research and announced their very own Tobacco Industry Research Committee, which would be run by scientists of unimpeachable integrity that they hand-selected. The totally unbiased committee worked tirelessly to defend tobacco.
More doctors smoke Camels. You'll feel better when you change to
Philip Morris launched light and low-tar cigarettes to give smokers a safer alternative to quitting. But these products were just as bad, and Philip Morris knew this. They even tweaked the product to make it hit harder by freebasing it, a chemical process you may recognize from things such as crack. They also tried their best to quietly target the youth, saying today's teenager is tomorrow's potential regular customer. But despite their PR efforts, Big Tobacco was getting cooked, and in 1994, Congress called them in for questioning in what would become one of the most infamous moments in corporate history.
Let me ask you first, and I'd like to just go down the row, yes or no. Do you believe nicotine is not addictive?
I believe nicotine is not addictive, yes.
I don't believe that nicotine or our products are addictive.
I believe nicotine is not addictive.
I believe that nicotine is not addictive.
I believe that nicotine is not addictive.
And I too believe that nicotine is not addictive.
But did you notice how they all said believe? This was a legal trick to avoid being punished for lying under oath, and it did work. None of these guys went to jail, but after 2 years of backlash, all of them had lost their jobs. In 2006, a court ruled that Big Tobacco had lied, misrepresented, and deceived the American public in every way physically possible with little, if any, regard for individual illness and suffering. As punishment, they had to put corrective statements on their packaging. Tobacco still kills over 7 million people a year. That's over 19,000 a day. Philip Morris's Marlboro Man changed the world, but 5 of them are now dead from smoking-related illness. Based off body count alone, Philip Morris may be the most evil company ever. But what if evil was about more than just fatalities? A lot of people accuse the $13 trillion asset management company BlackRock of buying up the single-family housing supply, pricing out normal people from ever owning a home. But they're only directly involved in other forms of real estate. There's a different company that's really buying the house you want, and it's actually the company that created BlackRock, Blackstone. They named it like that just to be annoying. Blackstone is the biggest landlord in the United States, using their infinite money supply from rich investors to swoop up housing specifically after market crashes. To Blackstone, the housing shortage is great news because it gives them pricing power, allowing their rents to grow much faster than inflation and sometimes at double the market rate. Blackstone also formed a company called Invitation Homes that now holds the largest number of single-family rentals in the US. In 2024, they had to refund $48 million for scamming their renters with junk fees and misleading them about eviction policies after the CEO had instructed staff to juice this hog. There are plenty of other turbo landlords outbidding normal people for homes and plenty of other tactics they use to milk their tenants, like monopolistic AI-powered rent pricing services and ignoring repairs. But according to these companies, they're actually the good guys.
If we think the American dream is embodied in a suburban home with a yard and a white picket fence, then I think we're making the American dream much more accessible.
Rent your American dream.
You can rent the American dream.
But to be fair, of the $2 trillion of US homes sold in 2024, corporate overlords only bought 0.3%. Their purchases are concentrated in certain neighborhoods, so if you're in the Sun Belt or living in a mobile home, you might feel their wrath. But companies like Blackstone didn't create the cost of living crisis. They just found a way to profit off it. But this next company is evil in every possible way. In 1996, Purdue Pharma launched a painkiller called OxyContin. During the release party, Purdue owner and cartoon villain Richard Sackler said the new drug would bring a blizzard of prescriptions that will bury the competition. And he wasn't lying. Purdue launched a massive Oxy marketing campaign with an army of sales reps incentivized with large bonuses. They went over to doctors and falsely claimed that Oxy's addiction risk was less than 1%, and that normal signs of patients being addicted, like asking for higher doses and early refills, didn't mean they were addicted. It meant they were pseudo-addicted, and the solution was a higher dose. Purdue held conferences and flew out thousands of doctors to tell them how awesome OxyContin was, and the drug started bringing in billions. But there was one small problem. In 2001, a prosecutor gave a conservative estimate that Oxy had killed 59 people in his half of the state. Richard Sackler responded to this in a private email, saying, "This is not too bad. It could have been far worse." It got far worse. More and more people began getting addicted, and Oxy overdoses were kinda becoming a serious issue. On top of that, in 2007, Purdue was forced to pay a $600 million fine for false advertising. Richard Sackler's PR strategy of hammering on the abusers in every way possible didn't seem to be working, because by the 2010s, all of this negative publicity was hurting the Oxy market. But Purdue had one genius plan to recapture lost sales. They hired McKinsey. McKinsey is a management consulting company. They get paid an insane amount of money to tell businesses what to do. When Walmart hired them in the early 2000s, they told the company to cut costs by dropping employee benefits. When they worked with Allstate Insurance, they invented the legendary deny button. So needless to say, McKinsey and Purdue Pharma were the perfect match. McKinsey cooked up what they called the OxyContin Sales Engine Turbocharge Plan. It involved advertising how Oxy reduces stress while countering the emotional messages from mothers with teenagers that overdosed. McKinsey also suggested giving refunds to pharmacies for every customer who got addicted. But even Purdue was like, bro, come on, that's too far. There's no way you just said that. With McKinsey's help, Purdue went on a generational marketing run, and opioids were printing them money. But by 2019, they were facing some lawsuits. 1,000 lawsuits. This is not too bad. It could have been far worse. $2 trillion of lawsuits. Purdue declared bankruptcy, and in 2020, they were found guilty for conspiracy to defraud the United States and offering illegal kickbacks to doctors. They reached a $7.4 billion settlement, with $6.5 to be paid by Richard Sackler's family. Luckily, they've stashed away a lot more than that, so they'll be fine. The supplier of the raw ingredients for the opioids was actually a name you might recognize: Johnson & Johnson, the company known for bangers like putting asbestos in baby powder, aggressively selling cancer-worsening drugs, and making the Wish.com version of the COVID vaccine. They had to pay $5 billion. A few other opioid pushers added another 21, and McKinsey paid $650 million. No one from these companies went to jail, except for one guy at McKinsey for obstructing justice. Not only did these companies' schemes cost hundreds of thousands of lives, but they also permanently damaged trust in the entire industry. If you wonder why people are skeptical of medicine and pharma, this is why. Purdue is the most evil company of the modern age, but to find the most evil company ever, we need to go back in time. Spices are something you take for granted today, but back in the 1600s, they were the ultimate status symbol. Displaying your spices was like displaying gold bars, but their supply mostly came from a handful of islands in Indonesia, and the Dutch wanted in on this. So they went to their top merchants and said, here's how we're getting those spices. All you guys will merge together to form one massive company. We'll call it the Dutch East India Company. And for funding, we'll get a bunch of investors to pull together money for you. In exchange, they'll get a piece of your bounty, your supply, your stock. Yes, we'll call it stock. They'll own stock in your company. All right, now that we invented capitalism, go conquer Indonesia. Sure. Oh wait, one more thing. You want to use the army? In 1621, the Dutch East India Company massacred 90% of the Bandanese population. Then they enslaved all the survivors, which was only like 1,000 people, so they imported more slaves from all around the world to run their spice monopoly. They went on to conquer the majority of Indonesia, take Sri Lanka for its cinnamon, and run up a colony in South Africa, all while destroying entire villages and burning down rival crops to keep their market dominance. These brutal conquests gave the Dutch all the spices they ever wanted, but the British wanted in on this too. So they started the British East India Company and conquered India with an army bigger than Britain's actual army. Then they started selling opium to China, which led to mass addiction. China was like, stop. The British East India Company was like, Back in India, after facing 100 years of land seizures, economic destruction, and racism, the locals revolted. The British East India Company destroyed this rebellion with mass executions and village burnings. But their atrocities were becoming a bit too mainstream, so Britain dissolved the company in 1874 and took control of India itself. The East India Companies were uniquely evil. Other companies used slave labor, but the East Indias ran their entire empire on it. Some companies invade countries, but the East Indias destroyed countries. Modern corporations run aggressive pharmaceutical sales tactics, but the East Indias did it first. But all of these companies have one thing in common. They were driven by the exact same pursuit. It's a pursuit that's done incredible things for humanity, but go too far, and humanity pays the price. The two most evil companies ever are long gone now, but the endless pursuit of profit is very much alive.